Hello everyone, meteorologist Matt Gray. Time for something that we haven't done in a little bit. Had some vacations, some holiday related stuff, but it's time for another YouTube brainstorm video. If you like what you see, subscribe to the 4 News Now YouTube channel. We got your local headlines covered, and we do some cool special content just like this. All right, so here is the big thing. We've got a new question today from one of our readers of the Brainstorm newsletter. If you don't know what that is, head to kxly.com. You can have a weather-specific newsletter that comes to you twice a week, written by yours truly. So Marilyn asks us this week, why are winter sunsets so vivid? Now, at first when I read this email from Marilyn, I went, are they though? But did a little bit of digging, stayed curious. Turns out there's some valid reasons why in the wintertime our sunsets are usually a lot more vivid and look really nice. Some of that has to do with the weather, some of that has to do with us as people, and not just talking about pollutants or anything like that. We'll get into that in a second, but also with psychology, just a little bit. So we'll go into all these reasons about why we're talking about this coming up, but I'll show you what we're talking about here. We've had some really nice sunsets lately. Had a couple of folks send in on kxly.com their sunset photos. One from Willow Lake near Cheney. That happened just the other day. They sent us this way. And then here's another one from last week in North Spokane. Even had a little sun pillar up there on the side of the clouds lately. So really nice sunsets. Definitely aided by some of the cloud cover there. So here is the question. Why is it often that we end up with a lot of these beautiful sunset pictures, much more so in the wintertime than in the summertime? Not saying we can't have great summertime sunsets, but just think about it for a minute. You might go, maybe there's something to this here. And that's what I thought too, because of a couple of reasons. And we'll go into the first one here. And that is simply this time of year lends itself to the process by which all those beautiful sunset colors are created. It's wintertime, and here on our northern half of the globe, that's when we have the lowest sun angle. So the sun consistently stays pretty low in the sky, and the lower the sun angle is in the sky, the more likely we're going to see those reds and yellows pop out, especially around sunrise and around sunset. Now, why does this happen in the first place? Well, we got to start with a very basic question that you have probably learned in elementary school. Why is the sky blue? Well, it's not from reflecting the ocean. It's not anything like that. It's simply because it's not just air in our atmosphere. It's all tiny little particles of stuff. In fact, that's why we have clouds, because we have little particles of stuff that all that water vapor floating around up there can latch onto. So here is what we're talking about. Sunlight, if you look at it, it's white light that comes out of the sun. However, as it passes through our atmosphere and all the stuff that's in it, the atmosphere itself, as particles of light hit whatever's floating around up there, they start to kind of separate the light colors, the colors of the rainbow, all contained within that white light. White is all the colors made up together from red all the way to violet. And that's a science-related topic for another day. But basically, white light, all the colors combined. And because of that, if you hit something, you can separate those colors, at least when we view it with our eyes. And that's exactly what happens when the sun is high in the sky. Blue light gets scattered around and reflected off of the atmosphere itself the most. And meanwhile, the rest of it comes down as white light. So when we're looking up at the sky in the middle of the day, we either see white, and in the case when you're looking almost directly at the sun, it's blinding white. But as you look further and further away from the sun, you see all that blue light that's been scattered around, the blue spectrum of sunlight that's been scattered around is now reflecting back into your eyes. And so that's why we perceive the sky to be blue, even though there's nothing inherently blue about it. It's just the wavelength of light, of the sunlight, that it scatters the most. Now, when we have the sun coming up or the sun going down, that's when things change a little bit, because quite literally, the sun has to pass through more atmosphere during that time when the sun is going down. It's passing through all hundreds and hundreds of miles of atmosphere as it works its way around the globe. So, what does that mean? Well, if it's passing through a much thicker layer of atmosphere, much thicker distance of atmosphere before it reaches your eye, that means it has a lot more opportunity to scatter away all of that blue light, all that green light, and so a lot of what we end up with by the time the sunlight finally treks its way across to your eyes are the yellows and the reds and the oranges. They have the longest, what's called wavelength, and so they're less likely to be influenced by stuff floating around in front or in the atmosphere between your eyeball, and the sun. And that's why we have these brilliant like sunsets, why we have these sunset colors that are what you most think about. You think of the reds and the oranges and the yellows when the sun goes down. And depending on what is floating around up in the atmosphere, say wildfire smoke, things of that nature, you can end up with different color combinations. Clouds can reflect sunlight. They can bounce off of the setting sun and then bounce that red and yellow light into your eyes. And that's why we see oftentimes the bottom of the clouds are seeing those reddish and yellowish hues. It's actually the sun that is set where we're standing on the ground long, long ago. But the sunlight is reflected up onto the cloud and then back down into our eyes. So it's literally shining on the bottom of the clouds, the sunlight is, when we see some of these beautiful sunsets. Yeah, I know, it's crazy to think about, but that's what living on a giant sphere will do to you. So here's another thing to think about when we talk about how brilliant the sunsets are at this time of the year. Think about the seasons, right? So it's not just about sun angle. We get more of that low sun, which helps us to see more of those oranges and reds and yellows, but also think about the quality of the air itself. A lot of times we get northerly winds, or we get Arctic air that comes down. We get air from the Pacific Ocean. It's crisp, clean air. It usually doesn't have as much stuff in it, not as much air pollution. It's crisp, it's clean, it's clear. Compare that to what happens in the summer, where we've got everything from wildfire smoke to deal with. You've got pollutants that get up higher into the atmosphere. I mean, look at all the major cities to the south of us here in the inland northwest or out to our west. Usually where our main wind directions come from in the summertime. All that stuff gets up in the atmosphere, even if you can't see it with the naked eye, but it will create that hazy summer atmosphere that we're used to, especially when you talk about that wildfire smoke. And that really, instead of preserving the separation of colors that we see when the sun goes down, it actually kind of makes a muted, muddly mess. And you'll see that a lot with wildfire smoke. It can create really red sunsets sometimes, but a lot of times it really kind of mellows things out. It makes things a very dull kind of yellow, orange, red, all clumped together type of sunset. So to sum it all up, sunset season, there actually is one, and it's in the winter around here. And the reasons why: you've got some cleaner air, you've got consistently lower sun angle, you got more cloud cover, by the way, in the winter as well, so that also helps create those beautiful sunsets. A lot of the sunset pictures, they got clouds in them. That helps. Plus, earlier sunrise or earlier sunsets and later sunrises. Oh goodness, and earlier sunsets. So these things are happening more in the times that we're awake or we're outside, and we're more liable to notice what's going on. It's not like in the summer where the sun's setting at like after 10 p.m. and the sun is rising at 4:15. It's during the times that we're most awake and up and moving about, and so we're more likely to notice them as well. So there's some psychology in it, there's some science in it, and there's some weather and climate patterns involved in it as well. So hope that gives you kind of an idea of why a lot of times in the winter we may see some more brilliant sunsets. I was a little skeptical about this when I started. I didn't think there was going to be that much of supporting evidence. It was like, sunset's a sunset. But when you really think about it and you really kind of dig in a little bit and do some quick searching, you realize that, observation, you just got to go look for a reason for it. But usually people's observations have some basis in truth. So thanks, Marilyn, for that question. Hope you guys learned something, and we will catch you next time on the Brainstorm videos here on YouTube. Talk to you soon.